Hello and welcome, I'm Olas Gerjuk and you're watching Head to Head with UATV. Today we're talking about the sanctions battle. Russia expanded its economic sanctions on Ukraine. Now the blacklist consists of the names of 567 individuals and 75 Ukrainian companies. Meanwhile, Ukraine has begun the process of preparing a new package of sanctions against the Russian Federation. This is due to its aggression in the Black and Azov Seas. To talk more about this, we welcome to the studio Valeriy Kravchenko, Senior Research Fellow at the National Institute for Strategic Studies. Hello and thank you for joining us today. Yes, Mr. Kravchenko, let's start with the Russian sanctions imposed on Ukraine. So, Prime Minister of the aggressor state, Dmitry Medvedev, has recently added 245 individuals and 7 companies to the list, mostly in the energy. These companies are mostly in the energy and defense sectors. So, in your opinion, how threatening are these restrictions?
Nothing special, actually, because all the sanctions, we waited for the sanctions.
So we were prepared for this?
And prepared for sure. And it's strange, actually, that we have started this battle of sanctions only on the 5th year of the war.
Yes.
Actually, all these people which put it in the list, they are mostly politicians, mostly well-known people. It's personal sanctions also, as you said, 75 companies also put it, of energy sector, of also companies which are producing the weapon. So it's obviously the weighted sanctions while we're having a war, so we need to reduce the opportunities of each other to produce a weapon.
You mentioned, yes, these companies, energy-producing companies and military companies, weapon-producing ones, yes. So
logistics also, yeah.
Yes. Why did Russia choose these entities? Do they have any business in Russia?
As you remember, it's the second list of sanctions,
yes,
from Russia against Ukraine. Some companies have put it on the first list also, and these companies which I was talking about in that list, especially companies of energy sector or producing weapon, these companies have 10 years or even 20 years history of cooperation with the Russian counterparts. If you're talking about the weapon, for example, while Russia is putting these sanctions, the additional argument for Russian Federation is that we are heading the competition on the weapon market in the third countries. So they're reducing our competitiveness.
Okay, so yes, they're beating their opponent.
For sure, yes.
But do these companies operate in Russia? That is what interests me. I mean, this state enterprise, Ukrbronprom, Center Energo, Ukr, Spets, Export, and others.
No, these companies not represented in the Russian market, and we just have any contacts. These companies have any contacts talking about some materials we are importing from Russia. I think that it's a significant reduction of such trade of materials, for example, to produce weapons. During the last 5 years.
Can we organize the supply of the materials that we have been importing from Russia from some different countries and find some different source?
I could say that a few years ago we signed 2 big deals. It's about the production of weapon and about the mostly widely security defense cooperation with Poland and with Canada.
Okay.
So it's political agreements, and also the third country which we are cooperating definitely in that sector is Turkey also, Turkey Republic. And if you need to provide example, for example, Motor Siege, it's not Motor Siege, but Yuzhmash. It's in Dnipropetrovsk region. Company, they signed a memorandum with Boeing 2 years ago. How to deal with this new conditions on the market with a new war which we have in Ukraine with Russia, and maybe it's our choice to make such diversification of routes. And Boeing, it's a good partner, it's a well-known company. If you are talking about the quality of such partnership, maybe not, because Boeing much more powerful. And the U.S. technologies is not the same that we are having the technologies
here in Ukraine. But we can develop, and there is still a way out.
And our additional value for United States, for example, it's that we know something about the Russians because we cooperate with Russian companies in the same sector and for a long time. And maybe our technologies looks like the technologies which are Russian having.
So they can study them.
For sure.
Well, thank you. It's important to hear that there is a way out. You mentioned that a lot of politicians are also including in these sanctions, a lot of names of the politicians. So to me it was interesting that a lot of representatives of the opposition party are actually included, and a lot of the representatives of the pro-Russian powers are included in the sanction list. And I would like to ask you, could it be connected somehow with the presidential race, and could it be used for PR for this people to build their campaign on?
It's not only about the presidential, but also we are expecting parliamentary elections in the autumn. It's a big preparation for big game of Russia here. And for example, we could speak about the two choices of Kremlin in that game. First one is, as you said, include such oppositioners, pro-Russian oppositioners, even very orthodox oppositioners, because Novinsky, for example, was included also to this list, and to use them as agents, as compradors, and here, and not only about the parliamentaries. For example, the mayor of Odessa, Gennady Trukhanov, was also included in that list.
Who has the Russian passport.
Even so, he has a Russian passport and a lot of pro-Russian sympathies, we could say. And it's one choice, as I said, so use these people as compradors, as agents, and to show that you see these patriots and nationalists, and in the one list with some guys which are pro-Russian. And the second opportunity for Russia, if you are talking about this opposition bloc, we know that it was split just a month ago, and two branches, one actually totally represented in this list. Akhmetov headed, unofficially Akhmetov headed branch with Vilkul, with all these oppositionists, and the another one with let's name it like a Lovachkin Firtash branch.
Yes.
No one
the
was
other oligarchs team.
No one was represented in this list, so it's maybe like a sign that that's our choice.
Whom
you
the
guys
Kremlin is rooting for.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, the document, this new list of sanctions, states that special economic measures will be applied in connection with the unfriendly actions of Ukraine regarding Russian citizens and legal entities. Could you please decrypt this for us, what this unfriendly behavior means?
It's funny, actually, because it's difficult to understand what they mean. Because,
by the word unfriendly.
Unfriendly, because
in the political way.
Because some people which we could see there, they're just parliamentaries, which are making their job in different spheres of their interests. I don't know how they just identified these people about their level of unfriendly relations to Russia. So
well, the thing is that politics is not about friendship, and I was just wondering, is it about the ban for Russian men of military age to enter Ukraine during the martial law, but this is only for 30 days. Basically, there is some certain period of this martial law functioning in Ukraine and in certain regions, or is it about the previous sanctions list that Ukraine imposed on Russia? But it wasn't that much severe because not so many individuals and companies were included, as far as I remember.
Yes, if you're talking about sanctions, it's maybe about the intentions. So politicians making their job, for example, Ivana Klimpoush-Tsintsadze was included to this list.
Vice Prime Minister on European integration.
On European and Euro-Atlantic integration. So
yes, Euro-Atlantic.
So actually, European and Euro-Atlantic. So it's both these directions are
valuable in her job, of course. This is the main focus of her work.
Her job on that post is probably not totally anti-Russian, but if so it's the same. It's synonymous, because if it's a pro-Euro-Atlantic Euro-integration, it's the same as anti-Russian intentions, and the sanctions is about the intentions. So the people which are intended to be with a European vector of development, with maybe we could say about some people from the opposition bloc. We mentioned they just put in like Canadians, like a special people in that list. But mostly it's a list of the people which are working against Russia, against the influence here, and against the desire to enforce its positions here in Ukraine.
To keep the control over Ukraine. Well, so how threatening are these sanctions? I started with this question, but then we shifted a little bit. So how threatening are these measures?
I think that if you are talking about this threat, we could speak not about the sanctions. For example, we could speak about the military incidents, in the Kerch Strait, in the Azov Sea, in Black Sea. We could speak about the military provocations we expect in context of the elections in some regions of Ukraine which are affected by Russia, like in Odessa, in Zaporizhia, or something like that. So that's the main source, of threat, and the risk zone. Sanctions is just what we are looking, and it's a political, as I said, political battle, political game, and we are expecting a lot of number of the sanctions around, and it's our reality we are facing now, and the main challenge for Ukraine to stay strong in that battle, to stay strong in context of the elections, and to receive the full solidarity from our allies, from our partners in that battle.
This is important indeed, and in this reality, Ukraine is to prepare a new package of sanctions to impose on Russia too. This is stated by Ukrainian President Petro Poroshenko. So what can we target?
I'm definitely don't know what we are targeting in Russia, but we just...
What can we target in Ukraine?
Yeah, with the sanctions.
Yes, I mean Russian assets, Russian businesses.
Probably Russian assets and Russian businesses and Russian influence and Russian money here, and we still have a lot of assets of Russian banks, for example, here in Ukraine, and not only in Ukraine. A lot of deals in judiciary sphere we just have in Europe against Russian Federation, and assets which are still in Russian in European Union, in some countries of EU, NATO. We could speak about that assets that we need to speak to our European partners how to implement these decisions and to get probably even that assets to Ukraine as a compensation, as a kind of compensation. And I'm far from estimating of the full effect of our sanctions against Russia, because the real indicator of an influence of real effect of the sanctions is, for example, the price on oil. It's not the sanctions of one country like Ukraine, which could really threaten to Russian Federation.
Of course, it's the joint influence.
Most valuable for us that on Friday and last Friday, European Union they just prolonged the sanctions on the next half year, and we expecting the sanctions of United States towards Russian Federation, the full scale of the sanctions, which first of all will be directed to the bank system. So that's most valuable. The full scale of this of the sanctions from all our allies and striving to protect Ukraine in that conditions, and to determine the limits where Russia could stop with its aggressive behavior, with its aggression, and this is the most valuable what we could see.
Well, let's hope that with these joint efforts we will eventually win over Russian threat, and we will convince Russia to reverse its policy and its behavior, change its behavior. Thank you so much for being a guest today in our studio.
Thank you.
That was Valeriy Kravchenko, Senior Research Fellow at the National Institute for Strategic Studies. Thank you for watching Head to Head. I'm Ales Gajuk. Goodbye.